Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Wow, what an awesome, amazing group of entrepreneurs that have turned up to Vision Villas. I am Terry Billington. I am the lead facilitator for the iLab group that is currently in their last week of a program right in this room. So I have the pleasure of being part of Entrepreneurs' Journeys as part of Roger's program. And I also have the pleasure of introducing Roger here tonight. So anyway, are you all ready? I don't believe you. Are you really ready? Woo!
So for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Roger Hamilton. This is our resort. So this is where we run entrepreneur retreats. And also I am the Bali ambassador or representative of Startup Grind. So Startup Grind was set up several years ago. It's part of Google for Entrepreneurs, which basically creates an ecosystem for entrepreneurs all around the world to be able to connect, share. So while today we're going to have an interview and Q&A, actually a lot more of tonight is about the networking and connecting with each other as well. So the person I'm going to be introducing up is someone who's doing something very similar to what we do here at Vision Villas, which is our iLab retreats, and that is Michael Bodekaer. In fact, just very similar to myself, he not only runs retreats, he actually is running right now Project Getaway here in Bali, but he also has his own businesses. So we're going to be talking about both of those two things. Michael Bodekaer shares his time between Switzerland and Bali. So that is his background. He kind of like jumps from one to the other. And he has multiple businesses, as we're going to hear. And let me just see, first of all, if you are part of Project Getaway, can you make some noise? And if you're part of iLab, can you make some noise? Okay, so we have quite a number. Hands up everyone here in the room who currently doesn't live in Bali, but you're here visiting. Could I see a show of hands? Wow, okay, so that's about half of everyone right now. And I think this is part of the conversation tonight, which is what is allowing that to happen right now? Why are we choosing a place like Bali? Why are we showing up? Why are we connecting? What's it all about? We're going to find out a bit tonight in this conversation. So can you please give Michael Bodekaer a big round of applause? So, well, let's start first of all with just a bit of a background. So we met maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, a couple of years ago, right? Yeah. You were running a Project Getaway then, you're running one now as well. Before we get into Project Getaway, do you want to share a little bit about, you got Live It and you got a whole ecosystem of different businesses you got set up. Do you want to share a bit about that whole pathway from your first business into multiple businesses? What drove you to do that and what are those businesses right now?
So where do we want to start? All the way back, or?
Well, not all the way back. I mean, like, if you were to like sum it up in, let's say, 2 minutes.
Yeah, perfect. All right, I'll give you a quick story. So, very quick background about myself. Sort of software developer, always been a geek. Very passionate about creating software products, but tried to build a couple of companies at a very young age and realized I was not that good at it. So started getting a business education as well while I was building these companies, and then was lucky enough to exit 2 companies, which was great. Not like huge exit, but enough to allow me to sort of step back for a while and think about.
So how long ago was that when that happened?
What's that?
How long ago was that?
Well, I was 15 when I started the first company, and so that's now 17 years ago. And
so some people are doing the maths on that.
Exactly.
So you had that. So at that point, the first 2 companies were in series, right? You did one, then you did the next one.
Actually, no. Yeah, I actually started even. I always have way too many things going on at the same time. Something that I'm learning at the moment, also to focus. I think that's a key learning for me in the last couple of years. But yeah, I was actually running 3 different companies back then, trying to figure out also what was the area I really wanted to work with. So I was creating those 3 different tech companies and quickly realized that one of them was really sort of, or 2 of them were the most promising ones at that stage. Back then it's called Lively and Smart Launch, so 2 tech companies. And I think through that process so not to get too detailed maybe that, but I mean, I managed to sell those 2 companies and that's at that stage where I sort of had to figure out what I really wanted to do with my life and why I was doing even these companies. And I actually decided to put all entrepreneurship completely on hold. So this was when I was about 24 years old. and joined the corporate world. Got a job as a management consultant, which was very scary. I worked there for about 1.5 years, and it was sort of for me to sort of see life from a different perspective than entrepreneurship. And my biggest learning in that experience was that I really have to work in smaller companies or quick impact companies where you could move fast and try and avoid the big conglomerates or corporates. So I sort of quit that corporate career, and that's when I sort of said, okay, I need to think once again, what is it really I want to do? And anyone who's read Eat, Pray, Love, or very traditionally, you go to Bali, of course, sort of reflect a bit on life and become all Zen. And so I did that, and the outcome was quite good for me. And the big learning was how important it is for me at least, to work on something I'm really passionate about, something that we just talked about out here in the break. Actually, something that, one, you're really passionate about, that you're talented about as well. So 2, and then 3, that has a big impact. Because those, I realized, was the things in the previous companies I had worked with that were sort of the thing that went again in the successful companies compared to the ones I started that didn't work out well. So I started really to sort of figure out, okay, what could those companies be, and how could I create the right environment to create those companies? And previously in my first career as an entrepreneur, I always worked in a basement, so very traditional startup story. And I thought
That's kind of funny, isn't it? Like if you're in America, you work out of a garage, whereas in Europe, you work out of a basement.
Yeah. And I literally lived there, and I slept also in this basement. I got sort of a little side room in the basement where I could sleep and live. And I enjoyed it. I loved it because for me, it was really about creating companies. And the more time I could devote into building these companies, the better it was for me at that stage. But I also realized that it didn't have to be that way. Maybe you could also actually enjoy the process at the same time. And by being here in Bali, I realized that there was a lot of opportunities for maybe creating an environment where you could be really productive and passionate about the things you do, but at the same time really enjoy the whole process. It doesn't have to be a basement. You could actually perhaps create a resort where you could actually create these companies and still be very productive, maybe even more productive. So start dreaming a lot about that whole vision and sort of building.
I remember when I first met you, you had something called the Powerhouse.
Correct. Yeah. It's changed the name now, but yes.
So, but it was really about creating an environment that other people want to come to work to, especially like here in. Bali's a tricky place because if you don't have a work permit and so on, but you were attracting people in from the mainland Indonesia, like into Bali, and they were happy to show up here and be part of it because of the environment you're creating as well. Mm-hmm. And you had quite a number of your companies that were working out of that space or are. So, do you want to just give a bit of a sense? I know you had some videos. Why don't we watch one of the videos as to what like one of the businesses are that you run to give everyone a bit of a sense?
I think we have a clicker.
Do we have a clicker? We have a clicker?
Oh, it's up here. Oh yeah, here it is.
So what would be one of the companies you're especially passionate about out of the different? Well, first of all, how many different companies are you currently running?
I think we have a slide on that. Even. There you go. We work even with more companies than this. So we create a space for just really quickly prototyping new ideas, following the lean startup methodologies in an environment where you really live and work, and so you could be as productive as humanly possible. Yeah. So these are some of the companies that are for the Getaway. We have a lot of guys here today also. Leftster, Smart Loans, Maclock is here also. I know. Mailbird, Ventus Performance, Redondo, and Startup Heroes. Also Rated, another company, and so forth. So we have a lot of companies, and the idea was really to create an environment where you could very quickly demo, prototype these companies, and still test whether the market potential was really there, and then execute from there. But do it all from Bali in an environment that you would, really be productive. And I think it's actually probably best to show the video on that one. Yeah, this is part of the wonderful team. We're 60 people now, so I think we did some.
60 in Bali?
No, all over the world, yeah. But mostly the headquarters in Bali, and this here is a video from the headquarters, not the typical headquarters, but and we really, I think what excites me the most about this is that we work on really high technology companies, really cutting edge stuff from a place which is Bali, which you would never really associate with technology or high tech. But it's really all possible.
And how many of your team come out like just for periods of time as opposed to those who stay here permanently?
So I'd say actually all companies, some parts of the teams stay permanently here, and usually also have parts of the team traveling globally around the world. Because I really say that's where we see the whole world moving in terms of work, where more and more people want to work remotely from different locations. So we're experimenting a lot with finding that right setup where you can still have a highly productive environment, which is a lot of fun and great, but also allows you to be very innovative, but also gives you the freedom to travel around. And the stage we're at right now is I see a lot of, it's often different stages of the company that allow these different levels of flexibility. So that's something we're working a lot on and experimenting with. But really the goal is to build the absolute perfect community of entrepreneurial people that can create a high level of innovation and really high level of well-being or life quality. So that's...
So if you were to jump into like what, so to give people a bit of a sense of like one or two of the companies,
Yep.
could you jump into one and just tell us a bit about what it is or how that works?
We have some videos for some of them. Yeah, so this is one of the companies. It's called Labster, and it creates virtual laboratories for teaching life science, so biotechnology and biology, and it's used by top universities now in Harvard, MIT, Stanford. Received large amount of grants also to create these, and this is really all made in Bali, which is, and a lot of the teams are even here tonight, which is super exciting. So it's really cutting edge stuff. It's, I mean, right now already reinventing or disrupting the whole education space. We see huge progress right now and lots of exciting customers. So here, very briefly, I mean, not to do a product demo, but I mean, you can create very advanced experiments in this virtual world, which is normally super expensive for schools. So by having the schools switch over to these virtual laboratories, they can save a lot of money, and more importantly, they can engage the students in the education by creating fun and engaging stories around the educational simulations. So the last one you saw there was a crime scene CSI investigation, where you get to be a CSI agent, and then you have to solve this mysterious murder. And little do you know that you're actually learning about rather boring science topics as you're solving this game here. So that's
do you charge just a flat rate to the universities, or is it like per student?
We had two main models, and this is something we've experimented a lot with the last couple of years, but two main models. One is $10 per student per semester. And the other model we also focus a lot on is custom development. So we work, for instance, with MIT to create really cutting-edge cancer simulations, our lab around cancer research, which is research that most universities or students would never really have access to because it will take so long time before all the equipment and technologies and techniques comes out to the schools. And now they can suddenly offer all of this high cutting-edge level of education to the students.
So, okay, so one of the biggest things that we talk about is a lot of people think that having a remote business or a global business is all about what you do online, but obviously it has so much to do with how you connect with your market. Someone somewhere got connected up with those universities, and you can't do that from Bali. You've got to physically be out there. Yeah. So so for those people on the technology side that can come out to Bali and enjoy their life, how do you set up the other side? Who's in America? Who's meeting up with Stanford? Who's making those deals happen?
I think that's a really interesting question, and of course also been sort of the big dilemma for us to figure out how does Bali fit into that whole setup. And I see very much for us in Livid, like Bali is the headquarter. This is where all the core innovation is happening. But we still have a very global team spread all over the world. So we have another office in Copenhagen as well. We've set up there where most of the sales team is located. And they travel around all over the world, do lots of presentations and pitches at different events and so forth.
Do your sales team actually represent different companies that you have? So when they're out there, they'll go to different clients based on where they are?
Yeah.
Okay, so you get leverage that way, right?
What's that?
You get leverage that way by, like, if you had one of those companies on its own and were sending off one salesperson off to, San Francisco or Silicon Valley.
So usually one salesperson is dedicated to one company.
Oh, they are,
because
right?
They usually, there's so much work also to be done that, there's plenty for one person to go around.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, so you have the sales team, and then they're out there doing that, and that allows you to then actually provide others with the opportunity to be here in Bali.
Exactly. So we do usually all the product innovation and product development and so forth here in Bali.
Okay.
It's really, if you think about it, Bali with the environment and the everything that's here, it really creates a perfect environment for creativity and innovation, and allows you to, both when you need a break, you can walk out literally 2 minutes outside our complex. You can see rice fields and reflect a little bit on what you're doing, and then get back in and start prototyping maybe new ideas.
Yeah.
So at least that's worked really well for us.
All right.
So far.
So that one, I think everyone gets that idea and what that business is all about. Any other exampes so we can see your...
I brought one other. Let's see here. I got the video. Yeah. So this is Mailbird. So maybe we can. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. We can. So this is an email communication platform. So it's sort of a one inbox for all your different online communication tools. So what you see mostly happening today is that almost every month there's a new WhatsApp or some kind of tool, Twitter, Facebook, that you need to start using. And what we've built is a tool that allows you to combine all of those into one. And especially also if you have multiple inboxes, now you can manage them much more effectively. So it's sort of it's a way for us to try and reinvent how online communication happens, and really work to create a communication tool that allows everyone to be more productive in this information overload type of world that we're entering into. And also going incredibly well. All product development happened here. Now we have parts of the growth hacking and growth team sitting also in the US. US is the largest market by far for this product, but really everything is developed here in Indonesia. Yeah.
So I just want to talk a little bit from this concept of having an idea, and because I know some people in the room are going to be more setting up a business and growing because of their lifestyle and they want to be out in Bali. Others will be actually thinking, well, Bali's a good spot for me to be growing, but I'm actually more interested in scaling a business and growing it. Like for example, something like Mailbird. If you were to say the difference of what you're doing with Mailbird, which is finding a new productivity tool, then finding a way to create it from Bali and have a good life, compared to something like Slack, which basically starts from nothing and within 18 months is worth billions of dollars. And that's because they said, right, let's go to where the funding is. Let's actually set this up as a truly scalable business. Let's grow it that way. And they've got a whole different strategy. How do you compete with those kind of companies that are scaling so rapidly? Do you actually get concerned that something like Mailbird will lose its niche, or are you looking to exit? What's your strategy of what you want to be doing long term with a business like that?
Also, I mean, obviously, this is something we're also working on right now, figuring out. And our thinking around this right now is that creating companies in Bali there's so many benefits to it, especially in the early stages. Also, it allows you to keep costs incredibly low, so you might not need as much investment. Actually, our investor is actually even here tonight. So, but you can
in Mailbird or
in Mailbird, yeah. Okay. And so what you can do is you can actually with angel investment you can get really, really far with the product, get way beyond even prototyping, also getting to a seed stage. And so what we're doing right now is actually raising Series A round and reaching the stage where you then also are thinking of relocating parts of the company to the US. But most US investors also at this stage, they know that the world is changing and more and more teams are global or distributed teams, as they call them. And they've seen it work, but there's many, many companies that it does work with. I think most notably WordPress or Automatic has a completely distributed team. And so it's actually still possible to get the investors. You have to travel to the US or somewhere else to get those, or Singapore also close by. So I think there is maybe stages for some types of companies where you say, okay, well, it might make sense for us to now also open an office in, let's say, the US and Silicon Valley. And then you get investors there and so forth, maybe have parts of the sales team. So because even for Mailbird, I mean, one of the next phases there is large corporate clients, which are also based in the US, and there you need a US presence to have that. But product development will most likely stay here in Indonesia.
So there might be some questions around this. I'm going to dig a little deeper in this whole idea, where there is, we're very connected to many different groups of people where they have different agendas as entrepreneurs, and there's kind of like this perfect storm of different groups coming together. So just throwing some numbers out there, the Global Entrepreneur Monitor has been tracking the number of entrepreneurs in the world every year, and like 2013 there was like 300 million, 2014 over 400 million, this year over 500 million, projecting over 1 billion by 2020. So you've actually got this massive growth in people that are being entrepreneurial. Most of them, are, like percentage-wise in Asia and Africa, is bigger than places like America. But they actually are like a whole different group of people. So for example, we ran a program here about 2 months ago, which was specifically for tech entrepreneurs. If you're a tech entrepreneur who's getting Series A, Series B, often the investor, hearing that you're going to spend time in Bali, is not what they want to hear, right?
No.
So you've actually got a game that's being played or a pathway that's being followed by a certain type of entrepreneur, which is like, no, I really want to like grow. And suddenly the idea of being in Bali kind of like goes counter to that, as long as the venture capital firms think that's counter to it. And then at the same time, you've got the same challenge with lifestyle entrepreneurs that are saying, well, I don't want someone to tell me what to do, so I don't want venture capital funding, and I'd much rather be in control of my own destiny and travel where I want to go to. Yeah. Often the same people are staying in the same co-working spaces, because co-working itself is exploding as well. And there's a third group, which often is linked to both of them, but often is separate, which is the whole impact entrepreneur who's actually trying to make a difference in the world. And sometimes that's someone who's a venture entrepreneur, sometimes it's someone who's a lifestyle entrepreneur. But it's almost like you've got these three groups that seem to be getting closer and closer together. Do you see the three of them being able to coexist easily, or do you see contradictions that you're having to face and iron out as time goes on?
It's a long question. So the
three groups
what
which we see. I mean, like in this room, hands up who is in this room who primarily, number one, is really interested in a lifestyle that gives you the freedom to do what you want, and you don't really want to go out and find lots of investors telling you what to do. Who's in that category? So we got that group, right? Yeah, that's a big group, which you'd expect. We're Bali, right? Yeah. Startup Grind is very much about the venture entrepreneur. It's very much about those who are actually looking to really see. That's why it's called Startup Grind, right? It's not called Startup Margarita, right? It's about what do we need to do to really make it happen, okay? Yeah. But some of you have chosen to be out here in Bali, but that's your goal. You're actually out there. You're raising funding. It's all part of it as well. Hands up, who's in that category with high growth company? Do we have? Okay, we got a few, right? But not so many. Not so many, but if you actually look at the press and the people showing up in Bali, there's more of that. And I put you in that category because you are actually going out getting funding as well. You've got a third part, which does have a big crossover with the lifestyle entrepreneur. But if they're getting funding, this is the impact entrepreneur. If they're getting funding from charities or funds that are actually helping support them, often they also aren't happy to hear that they're just hanging out in Bali, right? They actually want to be driven by something more. But hands up, who here is really an impact entrepreneur where you really say it's all about the impact. The fact I'm on Bali is secondary to the difference I want to make in the world. Who's in that category? So we got quite a few of them, but obviously lifestyles. But then there's a crossover. Some of you put up your hands twice, which is part of it too. So some people have figured that out. Some people haven't. Do you think we're going to go to a world where people actually start realizing they've got to be in different areas? And the reason I'm saying this again is with the group that came out here, many of them had gone out and raised pretty significant amounts of money and realized they weren't going to raise that money unless they set up an office in Silicon Valley or New York to make it happen. What's your thoughts?
I think especially the third group is very interesting, but also in general, I think it's true. Investors are, they are used to a certain way of doing things. They've seen other companies succeed by having an office here, doing things this certain way. And if you suddenly come to them and say, oh, I'm going to do it in a different way. I'm going to start up in Bali. And I'm going to, by the way, also put most of my team here. That's just not what they're used to. And so I've definitely seen that resistance myself. So I'm the type of person that if someone tells me something is impossible, then I need to prove them wrong. So that was sort of what I set out to do a bit also. And I think that's what's needed here. We need to show investors that this is a model that works incredibly well and that you can create really great success stories. And I think we're heading there. There's also other companies than the ones we're building. And if we can prove that, then I think suddenly they will, investors especially, will change their opinion around this specific topic and would be more than willing to, let's say, invest in entrepreneurs that are based here in Bali and other remote locations around the world. And I'm already seeing that. I mean, as soon as you start showing a couple of success stories, they actually start opening the eyes. So yeah, that might solve a bit on that one. Yeah.
So that's one aspect, which is how do we exist as an entrepreneurial ecosystem if we want to be traveling the world and we want to be getting out there, making a difference. There's a second element, which is something that I watch and I don't know the answer to this, and I'd love your feedback on this as well, which is that within any industry, as it evolves, like takes like coffee shop industry, everyone's got their own coffee shops, and then eventually Starbucks comes along, right? That you could actually say entrepreneurship itself is an industry, right? And to begin with, you'll run something like Project Getaway, people come out to that. We'll run something like iLab, people come to that. But everyone's really going to the smaller communities or tribes to get started. One of them, which you'll know, started about the same time as us, was Startup Weekend, right? And Startup Weekend kind of grew, so it's all around the world. And that wasn't that long ago they grew. And then 2 months ago, they get bought over by Techstars. So Techstars is basically like Y Combinator. It's one of the biggest, like they've got over $1 billion in capital, like within different companies, and they bought over the whole of that entire group, which includes, Startup Weekend, Startup Week, all of that. So now it's owned by a big organization. Do you think that the entire entrepreneur movement is in danger of being consolidated by some of those bigger organizations?
Yes, I do think so. I mean, another way to look at it is to look at Google or Microsoft or big companies like that. I mean, they are basically creating their own sort of whole world of entrepreneurship within the companies. And I think we will see more and more of that happening. Bigger companies will realize that in order to survive in the world we're in today, you have to innovate like crazy every single year. Otherwise, you'll go out of business. And so they need to create these entrepreneurial ecosystems within their companies. So I think we'll see that these hubs of entrepreneurship happening all over the world. And I'm very excited about that. I think that's great. Because at the end of the day, probably, I guess, why we're all here is to see the whole world as a community to grow and evolve and innovate. And whichever way that allows for more innovation to happen more effectively, the better it would be. So I'm also a big believer in competition. I think it's great. It pushes people to do more great work. And at the end of the day, I think we all will benefit a lot more. Maybe not individually, like, oh shit, now Google is doing exactly what I'm doing. But I think as a world, I think, and together we're better off with that setup. So I guess the follow-up question is then how should we react to that? What should we do, right?
Exactly.
And should we do anything? I don't think. I definitely see. I mean, from when I started 15, 16, 17 years ago as an entrepreneur, it was a lot easier to be an entrepreneur back then. It was harder to actually build the company, but there was a lot less competition. I mean,
you're saying it's easier back then than now?
Yeah, I mean, it was easier. It was a lot less competition. I mean, that's the main point here. So I mean, almost the stupidest idea, it would be great. Wow, you disrupted that whole space. And now I mean, everyone is in entrepreneurship. There's new ideas happening every single, and probably 1,000 ideas per hour or so created all over the world. So it's definitely a lot harder to create something that's truly unique or innovative here now, today. And I also think it takes a lot more years to create a really innovative product or something that truly contributes to more innovation in this world. And I mean, everything that we build and have built over the last couple of years takes at least 2-3 years to get to a stage where the product is sort of good enough to start adding more value to the world than existing services on the market. So it gets harder and harder to find those niches where you can really add value.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is one of the weird things about watching a place like America, because they have a whole different way of looking at things compared to here, where things are very much like everyone's in and just helping each other. And you talk about competition, but I think a lot of people here in the room even would experience collaboration and how collaboration works when you're in a community. There's something which I, again, look at, and it's from the outside looking at it, and I love you viewing this as well. And then we're going to open this up for questions, but a weird thing happened just in the last 2 years. I mean, actually since this time last year, which is we have gone from what was, in 2010, maybe less than 1,000 co-working spaces to 2,500 by 2013, by over 5,000 last year, and now we're actually on target to, I mean, the projections are we're going to go over like 15,000 within like 3 years' time, which is a crazy number of spaces. But most of them are actually people who've just set up their own group, and everyone's like, let's get together. And so there's a real kind of like feeling of collaboration within it. The very first company that's just gone crazy as a conglomerate is WeWork, right? And WeWork like really hit the news last October when it was suddenly worth $5 billion, right? And by June this year, it's worth over $10 billion, and it's like raised close to $1 billion in cash. And it's just the same thing. It's just basically co-working spaces, but they did two things differently. One thing was that they actually said our biggest asset's not the space, because we're just leasing the space. The biggest asset is the community, right? So everyone who joins the community gets all sorts of discounts to Uber and all this kind of stuff. And it's just in America and just started up in Europe now. Yeah. But the second thing was they've taken the place of the big department stores, which used to be the anchor tenants for the big developments, right? So basically the department stores would kind of like, rule the roost in the 1990s because they could get like rent so cheap because they went to the big super and like, massive, developments, like mixed developments, and they said, give us the space and we'll bring customers. And WeWork were the first to actually say, when we bring a bunch of entrepreneurs in, they're going to bring staff, they're going to bring spending money, they're going to rent from you, they're going to do all this cool stuff. And so the developers said, well, then we want that. And they started giving them special rates. And now it's the developers who are actually funding them to make them grow, right? Which basically means the entrepreneurs become the commodity, right? It's like we become the ones that are now funding $10 billion businesses like WeWork. So same question as the other one in a different way. To what extent are we fueling a whole different, and this is the dark side of entrepreneurship, because I know there's a lot of positive things and a lot of people here who are here for all the right reasons. But like, are we in a window of time which is like the honeymoon sweet spot of traveling around the world and having an awesome time? Or are we kind of like creating the kind of space for our own destruction as a result of the way that we are adding all this value? And what's your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I mean, to take quickly WeWork, I think that's really great. I think, I mean, that more and more, so I love to create great, innovative companies, and to do that, you need to have awesome teams and a great community and a great culture. And to me, that means you need to have these amazing co-working spaces where they can create all of this. And the more infrastructure like that we can get, the faster you can get out there and prototype and create these ideas. So I think we'll see probably just even easier access for you with your idea to and grow even a team within these spaces. I don't think it's gonna. I don't think that's going to change much in terms of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, in the sense that, I mean, already today when I build a company or someone builds a company, they usually have an exit strategy over a couple of years, and then they exit it to a big company. So the only difference here is, can I create that outside of a big existing conglomerate, like let's say Google, Microsoft, or Intel or something, or do I create it within the conglomerate itself? And I think we will see more and more companies realizing that if they want to keep the absolute best people in those companies, they need to create an environment that is almost as awesome as what what everyone is pursuing, this lifestyle where you can travel around the world with the freedom and work on the ideas and projects that you are really passionate about. And that is really what we're trying to do with Livid. And so when we prototype and figure out, okay, how do we build a culture, a setup, a system that allows that freedom, but still allows you to be innovative and create those amazing products, we do that to be able to keep all of these great people on the teams. So I think maybe what we might see, in the longer run, is that some companies will open up even more. Like, let's say WeWork will say, okay, why don't you can be part of WeWork or Livid. I should say.
Well, let me ask you a different question, because I want to get to everyone's question here. What if WeWork, they're going to list, right? Now they're a public listed company. Do you think that changes anything if you're an entrepreneur showing up at a WeWork office and they're now a public listed company? Does it make a difference?
I mean, it's an office space still. If I rent it, I rent it. If not, if I choose to work from the beach, I work from the beach. So I think, I mean, they're listed and they're that valuable because they're actually adding a lot of value.
Right.
It's not because they're taking away value.
Okay, good.
So,
good point.
So I think,
good point. So we are living in very interesting times. I mean, like, we really are at a very unique point in history as a result of what we're doing in this whole movement that's getting created at the moment. You've just heard at the moment from Michael how he's gone about doing it, which is really, really interesting, the way he's linked all these different elements together. Let's open this up for questions, right? So who would like to ask a question for Michael? And we've got a microphone coming as well. So when you're asking questions, just go ahead and first of all introduce yourself, say who you are, where you're from, and then go ahead with the question.
Hi, Michael. Brett Jarman from Australia. I've got 3 questions in one. The first is, what's your criteria for choosing the project to go ahead with? What is your measure of success, and what is your ratio of successful to not successful?
What was the second question?
What is your
criteria?
What is your measure of success?
Measure of success. Okay.
And then what is your ratio of successful ventures to not successful ventures?
I mean, I think 1 and 2 almost goes hand in hand. So the criteria for picking companies is back to the I mentioned these 3 areas. It's called the sweet spot. I think some of you've seen maybe this diagram with, you can imagine 3 circles where you have your passion, you have your talent or your skills, something you're really good at, and then you have the impact at the bottom. So you have these 3 circles, and the place where those 3 overlap, that's called the sweet spot. And I think a lot about that same idea. So they say that's the area you should work with. That's stuff you should work with. So if you're not passionate about it, if you're not good at it, and if it's not having an impact, impact, you should really ask yourself if you're doing the right thing or not. But let's say it's in there, then it starts to become interesting. So let's say we look at a lot of new business ideas all the time, and we're really selective because it has to be something where so now when I see live it, that we all really would be very passionate about it, and it's also an area that we specifically would be especially talented within, so more than anyone else might be, and we have certain areas where we are very skilled at, especially within tech. And then it's also something that we believe has a meaningful impact. And so impact can be many different things. So in terms of how we measure all of that, it's different from each company. So it depends a lot on what it is. So usually you have to pick something that's easy to measure. So let's say for us in Labstore, it's a lot about how many students are we impacting? What's the number of students that have been impacted there? And actually, so Labstore is doing incredibly well and raised $6 million in grants. And so we still own 100%, but we're not driven by the money part. I think you mentioned also earlier that money is incredibly important to grow and have an even bigger impact, so that's very important. But the driver for it should not be the money. It should come from a passion to have a huge impact and use all of your skills to create that impact. And the last question was, sorry again? Yeah. So it's been increasing the ratio of success, which I guess is great. In the beginning, I have had many failures. I sort of skipped easily over that part. But I would say right now we probably, we're doing very well compared to kind of market standard. I would say we're probably at 60-70% success rate of the companies that we have prototyped and created. So of course, then when is success? Is it when you get investment? Is it when you exit? We measure success in terms of having a big impact. They are all having a big impact and a growing impact. And so in this case, also investment has also been made.
But that's really interesting because like you take the whole venture model is like 10% success, which means the rest just fail altogether.
Yeah.
So to have 70% success, and this is a venture business where you're actually then bringing the expertise and everything like that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a really amazing, it's a really good model.
And that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, that we've been able to create a culture and a team that is able to really deliver that. And I think, it's a team and the execution, but it's also back to the circles, the selection, and being really critical when you go into new ventures. Something I've learned. So find new co-founders for new startups, for instance. Is that, yeah. So we used to use the term equal share, equal passion. I think is something that we believe a lot in. The model that we then, it's very much case by case, and we look for great ideas that are something that, again, that matches our existing ecosystem and the products that we create. So we know that we can really add a lot of value there. We follow the general model called a startup studio. So it's sort of an evolving model that seems to sort of be the new. So there's accelerators, incubators, and then there's startup studios. And very briefly, accelerators usually very short, few weeks, get a little bit of money, a lot of mentorship to sort of get your product going, and then you let go after that. So you don't really get any follow-up mentorship or anything like that. 500 startups is an example. Incubators are a lot more involved for a longer period of time, but they usually also let go after, let's say, 6 to 12 months, usually according to us. And then startup studios is really a model where you are an active co-founder. And what we see delivered as often is sort of the dream tech co-founder for your amazing new idea. So if, let's say, you have an amazing idea, but you really need a CTO or someone to come in, really build that amazing product, that's where we've seen over and over again that we can add a ton of value. So we usually look for people that have an amazing idea, and they have a lot of domain expertise within that area, and then we can come in and build that product around that. So when I consider the value we're bringing compared to, let's say, a tech co-founder, we bring a whole team. You saw some of the video. There are some of them here also tonight. It's a really amazing bunch of people, and we have done this so many times now that we can create some really amazing technology, cutting-edge technology products now. And we don't just build it with you like an outsourcing company and then leave. we actually stay on board throughout the whole cycle. We make sure we have enough resources to do that as well.
Well, just to
sorry,
qualify, like out
Yeah.
of all the people that are working within your different organizations, how many of them would be equity holders compared to just employees?
So usually we have, so everyone actually usually gets shares in the different companies. We are at least really pushing for that model. I think that's, I believe a lot in that. But then usually there's 2 to 3 co-founders that are, investing a lot of their own money usually upfront and a lot of their time, so would work for free for several years in the early stages, and also ideally have a prototype of some sort already, so can sort of prove that it's there.
But most of everyone's thinking of themselves more as entrepreneurs and employees within your teams, right?
Yeah. I don't like the term employees.
Right,
I
exactly.
usually call them team members or partners
Yeah.
because we're really all in it together.
And I think that is the difference, because a lot of times you're looking for a contractor in like a different country and they're just coming in to do a task, whereas you're building an actual entrepreneur ecosystem within your business as well. Yeah.
And I've spent a lot of time on personal self-development, coaching, and trying to figure out how you can create a mindset that is as productive as possible, because I think productivity is a lot about your mindset and the way you think and tackle things. Pomodoros are great for being productive, but it's really more the actual things you do and think about in those short sessions of focused time. There's enough for a whole talk. I don't know. So what are the key things that I do? So I do a lot of things. I have to make sure I stay as productive, as impactful as possible. So very brief list is I have a very rigorous sort of morning routine that I go through every single morning. Briefly, I do exercise every morning. I plan my day. I make sure I write down my gratitudes. I think that's a really powerful mindset thing. And I don't just write it down. I actually feel, what am I grateful for? What are the things here in this life that I'm really grateful for? I think that's very important as well. Write down the goals, top goals at the moment, so I make sure I focus on the things that are really important, rather than getting caught up in all the things that come in. Do you have 2 minutes? Could you help me with this? So you really try as much as possible to focus on the important things there. I also recently started planning actually my week out, really half hour by half hour, and I do that every Sunday. I spend a couple of hours just planning out the whole week. Even with transport times and everything, and I found that to work incredibly well. So it really allows you to sort of step back and reflect on the week and see, okay, why am I actually spending the time on the most impactful things here? And I have my co-founders or other people usually look at that to challenge it, and it usually means I actually cancel a few meetings even during the week to make sure I use the time most effectively. So those are some of the things. But I'd say, generally, I think through my whole career, one of the most important things I've done is work generally on reading self-development books. And I know you have great books, and there are so many good things out there.
We actually have a library upstairs of our whole, so if anyone wants to go have a look at that afterwards as well, I think that's such a critical thing as well, right?
I think, and a lot of people in this world, like Anthony Robbins had a great quote, he said, where most people spend more time on learning how to control their remote control than how to control their own brain. And I think that's a great metaphor for really, we should all really spend time to understand ourselves and how we think, why we think. And that, of course, makes yourself happy, but you can use a lot of that also for being more productive and impactful in the way you think about business, how you pick the right companies, and all these things, by really understanding what am I passionate about? What are the things that will, not just what am I excited about right now, but what would I be passionate about for the next 5, 6, 7 years? Because that's what you need to do if you go into a new venture. You need to have a sustained level of passion for many years to be able to succeed with that.
So just to follow up on that question, because some people are dysfunctional in that they can't help but be successful, right? So you hear them talk and they're like, well, I just do this and then I'm just successful. And there's an element of you, which is that. It's like you could put yourself in the Gobi Desert and you'll find a way to be successful. But you're scaling, right? A lot of people here in this room are in the same situation where they'll show up in Bali and they just focus and they just get stuff done, take some time off, come back, and they just still make it happen. But the moment they try and build a team, there's other people who go, yeah, I'll do that. And then where are you? I'm off surfing. And you can't make that happen.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular is it the selection process of the people you bring on board, or is it an onboarding process or an orientation and a culture which they step into so that you can head off to Switzerland and everything's rolling because everyone's still got that level of commitment and focus? What do you do as you're scaling to make sure everyone's in that same culture?
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the things in Livid that when our term is right now work and play reinvented. So we're really working on figuring this piece out, and we've got a lot of great things going there. But most importantly is I'd say the people. It requires a special mindset to be able to live in Bali and not get distracted by all the many things. And I think the key thing here is that you're actually more passionate about the work that you're doing than going on the next beach to surf around. And then nothing wrong with beach. I think it's great. We just came from one actually before going here, and we were working there a bit, maybe also relaxing a bit. But I think that the key is to find people who are so deeply passionate and excited about working on having a big impact that they actually would often prefer to stay there. And if they're not, then that person might need to work with something else. It's usually more for that person to figure out exactly what they're passionate about. So we usually look really for people who are excited about the things that we are excited and are working on. So I think that's probably the main thing. But then besides that, we have a bunch of different initiatives in Livid where we have, for instance, we have time tracking. So everyone does time tracking in Livid. And a lot of people ask, so why would you do that? And actually, for me, the most important thing is that you could see yourself. It's mostly for yourself to see, okay, I've actually worked X number of hours a week. I could go off now and relax a bit, and it's okay. It's completely okay. And knowing that everyone else also does the same, so we all sort of are okay with also spending some time on relaxing. I think that's really important for that. We even you're actually paid for doing exercise, so we think exercise, for instance, is incredibly important for productivity as well. So we also allow you to track that and personal development also because it's so important.
Last question. Anyone like to ask a final question?
Setting up multiple businesses at the same time globally, that is one issue. The other issue is the management of it. So I'm quite fascinated to find out how you manage.
Yeah, so the trick to managing multiple companies or working with great people, I think that's the key. Besides that, being very productivity focused and organized with your time. I am probably hyper. I'm really planning everything I do. Have task lists for everything. I try my best to not get distracted with things unless I choose to be distracted, which I think there should be time for going and relaxing. So you definitely need to be very structured with your own time and also realizing the value of your time. Ideally put a price on your time, which is more than whatever salary you make. It's really your life we're talking about here. And then make sure that you yourself value that time and spend it on the most impactful things. So the weekly planning, making sure that you sort of allocate the time to the projects in the multiple companies where you can add the most value right now is key. And that changes a lot for me, for instance. I'm good at some things, but there's a lot of people that are a lot better than I am at many things. So I also realize when to let go and let others handle things. So I think letting go is perhaps also an important thing, something I'm practicing a bit these days. And trusting others to also do a good job in those ways.
So I'm assuming that with every one of these companies, you've got a management team that's got equity that's in there that you're motivating and so on. So just to finish off, because we talked about a lot of good stuff here, could you think of a management nightmare story where something went really just not to plan at all, and then what you did about it?
Well, I had one company that failed miserably, and that was because of a team issue. So we were 4 co-founders, and that's an interesting thing where the problem there was the skills were there. We were perfectly complementary skills. Everything was good. We had a great idea, good product, but we were very different in terms of beliefs and culture, and that just totally clashed. It did not work out at all. And so without going into too many deals, it sort of ended okay, but we really had to cancel the project. We worked about 1.5 years on it, invested a lot of money, and it had a lot of potential, but it really just was because the management team we as a team did not function well together because of these different beliefs. So I'd say again, it comes back to the people. It comes back to creating a culture and creating a team that have those same values. And that's also what Project Getaway really is all about. We are so careful about who we bring together. It's all about having the like-minded people with the same mindsets. Not that there's right or wrong, it's just the same mindset. And once you're able to do that, it sort of magically all works out better than you could ever dream of or imagine. Yeah. So that would be, I think.
Very cool. Thank you, Michael. So talking all about people, I mean, here we have a whole number of different people here. Definitely make the most of this evening, right? I mean, we're going to finish up this session here now. Spend time, get connected to others. I mean, it really is an awesome group. I know you brought an amazing group of people in from Project Getaway. I know we have an amazing group here, and I know everyone else who's actually found their way here in whatever form. You know, it's more and more common than in a place like Bali. Entrepreneurs are getting together and connecting with each other. But all the more that when you actually have an opportunity to do it, like here, like really make the most of it for sure. So we'll both be around, and would love to get connected up with you. This is all being recorded and actually goes up onto the Startup Grind website as well. So every one of the different chapters where we actually have these sessions, they're up there. So go and have a look afterwards if you like to have a look again, hear what Mike was saying, share it with your team, and also check out some of the other videos that are up there from around the world as well. So with that being said, I want to thank you very much for just kind of like coming here and just sharing everything you've been up to. It's been really awesome. And can we please give Michael a big round of applause?